I wasn't supposed to come home that day. The original plan was to stay on base for another 3 days. But things wrapped up early. I figured, what the hell? I'll surprise Rose. It had been 6 months since I'd seen her, and I was looking forward to her smile, the way she always pretended to be annoyed that I didn't give her a heads up. The drive home felt different, though. It's hard to explain. Maybe it was just the exhaustion from months in the field, or maybe it was the silence of the empty highway stretching out in front of me, but something in my gut twisted. I ignored it. Rose had been by my side through 12 years of deployments, late-night calls, and long stretches of silence. She was my rock, my constant in a world full of chaos. But as I pulled into the driveway and saw a car parked outside the house, a sleek black SUV I didn't recognize, my instincts flared, sharper than they ever had in combat. I told myself it was probably nothing. A friend, a delivery, something innocent. But that tight feeling in my chest wouldn't let go. I stepped out of the car, shutting the door quietly behind me. The blinds were drawn. That wasn't like Rose. She loved natural light. The house was always open, bright, like her. I stood there for a second, listening. There was no sound from inside, no movement, just a dead stillness that made my skin crawl. I slipped my key into the door and turned it slowly, barely making a sound as I stepped into the house. The air felt thick, heavy, like it was holding secrets I wasn't ready to hear. My boots barely made a sound on the hardwood floor as I moved through the hallway, but I could hear it, the soft murmur of voices coming from upstairs. One voice I knew like the back of my hand. Rose's? Her laugh was light, playful. It was a laugh I hadn't heard in months. Not like that. Not since before I left for this last deployment. But it wasn't just her. There was another voice. A man's. I froze. My hand gripped the banister so hard it hurt, but I couldn't move. My heart pounded in my chest, my mind racing through every possible explanation, each one more painful than the last. I forced myself to take a breath. Maybe it's nothing, I told myself. Maybe it's a family friend, someone from work. But deep down, I knew. I knew before I even took that first step up the stairs. Each step felt like I was dragging my feet toward a truth I wasn't ready to face, but I couldn't stop myself. The door to our bedroom was slightly ajar, offering just enough of a view to catch a glimpse of them. Rose, half covered by the sheets, and a man sitting beside her, shirtless, his hand casually resting on her waist. They were laughing. She was laughing, the kind of laugh that was meant for someone she cared about. Not me. I felt like the world had dropped out from under me. The floor could have collapsed, and I wouldn't have noticed. My legs trembled, but my mind was already firing in every direction. Rage, confusion, betrayal. It hit me like a punch to the gut. This was my wife, our bed, and this stranger, this man, he didn't belong here. For a split second, I wanted to burst through the door, to throw him out of my house, to demand answers from her. But something held me back. It wasn't fear. No, it was something worse, calm. That deadly calm you get right before a mission when you know exactly what you have to do, and nothing will stop you. I turned around and walked back down the stairs as quietly as I had come. I didn't want them to know I was here. Not yet. Not until I had all the answers. Back in the kitchen, I leaned against the counter, my head spinning. The rage was still there, bubbling beneath the surface, but it wasn't going to control me. Not yet. I had learned a long time ago that emotions were dangerous. They made you reckless, clouded your judgment. I needed to think this through, gather intel, just like any other mission. I reached into my duffel bag, pulling out my phone. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to breathe. If Rose was cheating, and if she thought she could hide it from me, she was dead wrong. I'd spent my career getting behind enemy lines, gathering information without leaving a trace. This was no different. First, I needed to confirm what I had seen. It wasn't enough to storm in and accuse her. I needed proof, something undeniable. I started searching online for surveillance tools, hidden cameras, voice recorders, trackers. These were things I could use, discreetly, without tipping her off. I knew the tools for missions, and I knew how to install them without raising suspicion. I just never thought I'd be using them against my own wife. I ordered everything, overnight delivery, and turned my attention to the next step, her phone. That thing was always with her, but tonight, when she wasn't looking, I'd clone it. There were apps that let you pull everything from a phone. Texts, calls, emails, without them ever knowing. I had used similar tech on targets overseas. This time, it would be Rose's phone in my hands. As I paced around the kitchen, waiting for them to come downstairs, my mind raced. Who was this guy? How long had this been going on? Was he some stranger she met at work? Or was this someone I knew? Someone who had been around, laughing at me behind my back? I heard footsteps on the stairs, and my heart stopped for a second. Her light laugh echoed down the hallway, followed by his deep voice, so casual, so comfortable. I clenched my fists, but I didn't move. I couldn't give myself away. The front door opened, and I heard them say goodbye. I peeked through the blinds in time to see him, tall, built like someone who thought he could handle himself in a fight, walking to the black SUV. He didn't look back, didn't even hesitate as he drove off into the night. Once the door clicked shut behind her, I heard her heading back up to the bedroom. Now was my chance. I moved quickly, the way I did on missions when time was against me. I grabbed the cloning device I had stashed in the duffel bag, the same kind I had used on assignments before. It looked just like a regular charging cable, but this thing could pull everything off her phone in minutes. I slipped up the stairs, moving as silently as possible. She was in the bathroom, probably getting ready for bed, so I had a window. I reached into her purse, grabbing her phone. With a few quick movements, I plugged the cable into it and watched the screen blink, transferring everything, texts, calls, emails, photos, onto a separate, hidden drive. I tucked the phone back into her bag just as I heard the bathroom door open. I slipped out of the room and down the hall, pretending to be grabbing a glass of water. When I heard her footsteps coming down the stairs, I forced myself to act normal. She smiled when she saw me, but it felt different now, like she was wearing a mask I hadn't noticed before. "Hey, babe," she said, her voice soft and sweet. "I didn't expect you home tonight." I smiled back, though it felt like my face was made of stone. "Thought I'd surprise you," I said. "How was your night?" She paused, just for a second, before answering. "Oh, just relaxing. Had a little wine, watched some TV." I nodded, fighting the urge to say more. But now wasn't the time. I had what I needed. "I'm going to hit the sack early. Long day." She kissed me on the cheek, and I felt cold. Every touch from her felt fake now, like she was acting out a script. Once I was back in the bedroom, I opened my laptop and plugged in the drive. The cloning process was done. I scrolled through her texts, emails, looking for anything that might tell me more about this guy. And there it was, messages hidden away under a different name in her contacts. He wasn't just some random fling. They had been seeing each other for months. My hands gripped the laptop so hard I thought I might break it. But I didn't lose it. I couldn't. Not yet. I needed more. I needed to see them together again, to catch them in the act. Tomorrow, the cameras would arrive, and I'd set everything up while she was at work. I'd place them where they couldn't be seen, the bedroom, the living room, and if she ever brought him into this house again, I'd have everything I needed. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about control. In war, you don't just rush in. You plan, you gather intel, and then you strike. And when I struck, they wouldn't see it coming. The next morning, I acted as if nothing had changed. I went through our usual routine. Coffee, some idle chatter about the weekend plans, her mentioning a possible outing with friends. She played her part well, but so did I. The hardest part was smiling back, knowing what I'd seen and heard last night, but I couldn't slip up. Not now. She left for work, and the house felt empty without her presence lingering in the air. But this wasn't the time to dwell on feelings. Feelings were a distraction. I went back to the kitchen, took a deep breath, and grabbed the delivery that had arrived first thing in the morning. A plain brown package holding a small arsenal of surveillance equipment. The kind civilians rarely come across, but I knew it all too well. Small hidden cameras, voice recorders, and a GPS tracker, tools that felt like second nature to me. I set up the cameras in strategic places. One in the bedroom, angled toward the bed but hidden in a vent. Another in the living room, tucked inside an old decorative clock she never bothered with. And the last in the hallway, positioned to get a full view of anyone coming in or leaving the house. The voice recorders were more delicate to place, but I managed, slipping one into her favorite handbag and another under the driver's seat of her car. These devices were military-grade, with sensitive microphones that could pick up conversations even in a crowded space. Once everything was set, I double-checked the footage on my laptop. Crystal clear. If she brought him back here again, there wouldn't be any doubts. Now it was time to wait. And if there's one thing I learned from years of surveillance operations, it's how to wait. In the meantime, I poured through the clone data from her phone. My heart tightened as I read the text messages between them. He was saved in her phone under the name Sam, which seemed like an ordinary name for what looked like an ordinary affair. But the messages, they weren't just flirtatious or meaningless. They were intimate. They spoke in code about meetings, about feelings, about him being her escape. It was like reading messages from a stranger. This wasn't the Rose I knew, the one who laughed at my dumb jokes, who held me after nightmares from the field, who used to look at me like I was her whole world. Where did that Rose go? Or maybe she never existed. I couldn't afford to dwell on that thought. Not now. I needed to be prepared for what was next. The first recording didn't take long to deliver. Later that evening, she came home, and the camera in the hallway showed her stepping in with a casual smile on her face, acting as if it were just another day. But on the voice recorder in her handbag, there was a message, barely audible, but clear enough. She was leaving a voice note. "I'll see you this weekend. He's going to his parents' place, so I'll be free." That confirmed it. She was planning on seeing him while I was supposed to be away visiting my folks. It was so ordinary, so routine for her, as if this had all become part of her life, something she could switch in and out of like clothes. But that wasn't what shook me the most. No, what really got me was that I recognized his voice when she called him. It was Rick, a close friend, another soldier I'd known for years, who'd served with me in Afghanistan. He was the last person I would have suspected, someone who had been in my house, at our family gatherings, sitting across the dinner table with a laugh and a beer. He wasn't just taking my wife. He was betraying a brother in arms. The anger that had been simmering in me for days came to a boil, but I had to stay calm. I couldn't let them see what was coming. I spent the next few days tracking their messages, listening to conversations, and gathering everything I needed. I didn't just want to confront them. I wanted them to feel the weight of their betrayal, to understand that they had picked the wrong man to deceive. Friday evening, I told Rose I'd be leaving early in the morning to visit my parents. She smiled, relieved, thinking her plan was working. I left the house at 5 a.m. sharp, parked a few blocks away, and returned on foot, making sure not to be seen. I had already disabled the cameras in the hallway temporarily, so they wouldn't pick me up when I re-entered the house. I stayed in the basement, quiet, listening to every creak of the floorboards above, waiting for them. By noon, I heard a car pull into the driveway. The feed from the hidden cameras showed Rick walking up to the front door, casual as ever. Rose let him in with a smile, one that cut through me like a knife. I watched through the feed, every instinct screaming at me to rush upstairs, to put an end to this. But I stayed in place. I needed to finish this once and for all. They made small talk for a while, as if it was nothing, as if they hadn't already ripped my life apart. I could hear the conversation through the recorders. Rick laughing about some story from the base, Rose saying how nice it was to feel normal around him. Then, as if they didn't have a care in the world, they made their way upstairs, to the bedroom. That's when I moved. Quietly, deliberately, I went up the basement stairs, careful not to make a sound. I made my way to the living room, grabbed my phone, and opened the live feed from the hidden camera. There they were, laughing and embracing, like this was their house, their life. I took screenshots, dozens of them, each one more damning than the last. My heart was pounding, my blood boiling, but I wasn't going to let them hear me until I was ready. I went to the front door, opened it wide, and called out, "Rose? You home?" My voice echoed through the house like a gunshot. There was a brief moment of silence, followed by the sound of them scrambling upstairs. I heard Rick curse, then footsteps racing to the bedroom door. I stayed in the hallway, listening as they whispered frantically, trying to figure out what to do. It was almost pathetic. Rick emerged first, pulling on his shirt, his eyes wide with panic when he saw me standing there. He started to stammer out an excuse, but I just held up a hand. Not a word, I said, my voice steady, cold. You're done talking. Rose appeared behind him, her face pale. Mark, Save it. I cut her off. I've heard enough. I pulled out my phone, opened the folder with all the pictures and recordings, and tossed it on the coffee table. I've got everything. I know about all of it. The color drained from Rick's face. He took a step back, glancing towards the door, like a coward looking for an escape route. Rick, I said, my voice low, you were a brother to me. And this is how you repay me? I didn't mean, he started, but he couldn't finish. There were no excuses left. I trusted you both, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. And you thought I wouldn't find out? Rose opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't let her. I was going to give you both a chance to come clean, I said, shaking my head. But you didn't. You kept lying, and now... I paused, taking a deep breath. Now, I'm going to make sure you feel the consequences. I didn't yell, didn't raise my voice. There was no need for that. I had all the evidence I needed, and more importantly, I had the power to decide what happened next. The room was deathly silent. Rick stood frozen, his eyes darting between me and the door, probably calculating how fast he could make a run for it. Rose, she just stood there, clutching the edges of her robe, the guilt written all over her face. It was almost laughable how fast the facade crumbled once they knew the game was up. I could see her trying to find words, scrambling in her head for something, anything, to make this less damning. But nothing could. I slowly walked over to the coffee table where I had tossed my phone, picked it up, and scrolled through the photos again. The ones I had taken of them in bed, her laughing, his arm around her. I held the screen up to Rick's face, watching him flinch as he saw himself, caught red-handed. Looks familiar, doesn't it? I said, my voice calm, steady, the kind of calm that makes men nervous because they know what's coming. This isn't just an affair. It's a betrayal. Rick looked like he wanted to speak, but I could see his throat working hard. Words stuck somewhere behind the guilt and fear. Good. Let him squirm. I turned to Rose next. She hadn't moved, hadn't made a single attempt to defend herself. She knew there was no point. How long? I asked, my tone low. How long have you been making a fool out of me? She swallowed hard. Mark, I didn't. Don't lie to me. My voice was like ice, cutting her off before she could spin another excuse. I've got everything. The messages, the calls, the times you lied about where you were. I'm giving you one chance. How long? Her eyes darted to Rick, then back to me, and she broke. 6 months, she whispered, her voice barely audible. It started when you were deployed. I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth would crack. 6 months. 6 months of lying to my face, pretending everything was fine. And with him, someone I had considered family. Rick finally found his voice, stammering out something that sounded like an apology. Mark, man, I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me. It just happened. It wasn't supposed to. Shut up. I didn't need to hear his pathetic excuses. You think you can stand there and apologize? After everything we've been through? I walked toward him, slowly, deliberately, watching him shrink under the weight of his own shame. I trusted you with my life, Rick. I bled for you, fought alongside you. And this is how you repay me. He didn't say anything, but I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew what I was capable of. He knew, if I wanted to, I could break him right here, right now. But that wasn't my plan. I turned away from him, focusing on Rose. You knew what this would do to me, I said quietly, the hurt slipping through my controlled facade for the first time. You knew, and you did it anyway. Her lip quivered, but she didn't speak. There was a long silence, the weight of it pressing down on all of us. I felt the rage swirling inside me, but I kept it locked down, tight. This wasn't the time to let it loose. Not yet. I'm not going to stand here and yell at you, I finally said, my voice eerily calm. I'm not going to beg for answers, and I'm sure as hell not going to give you the satisfaction of knowing how deep you cut me. I paused, letting the words sink in. What I am going to do is make sure you both know what real betrayal feels like." Rick's eyes widened, panic flashing across his face. "Mark, man, come on. Get out of my house," I said, cutting him off sharply. "Now." He looked at Rose, as if waiting for her to say something, but she just stared at the floor, her guilt suffocating any words she might have had. "I'm not going to tell you again," I growled, my patience wearing thin. Rick scrambled to pick up his shoes and jacket, fumbling at the door as he made his way out. For a brief moment, he looked back, as if hoping I might forgive him, or at least show him mercy. But I didn't. I just stared him down until he disappeared into the driveway and sped off in his black SUV. Once he was gone, the tension in the house shifted. It was just me and Rose now, the woman I had loved for 12 years, who had been by my side through some of the darkest moments of my life. And yet, in this moment, I couldn't feel anything but emptiness. She sat down on the edge of the couch, her hands trembling in her lap. "Mark," she began, but her voice broke. I didn't let her continue. "This is over," I said flatly, emotionless. "You've made your choice." Her eyes welled up with tears, but I didn't care. Whatever guilt or remorse she felt now, it was too late. She had destroyed the foundation of everything we had built, and there was no coming back from that. I walked toward the door, grabbing my keys and my jacket. "I'll be in touch with the divorce papers. I suggest you start packing," she sobbed, trying to reach for me, but I pulled away. "Mark, please." "You're not the woman I married," I said quietly, not even looking at her. "You haven't been for a long time. I just didn't want to see it." With that, I turned and walked out the door, slamming it behind me. As I walked to my car, I didn't feel victorious. There was no sense of satisfaction or relief, just a hollow emptiness that settled deep in my chest. I had won the battle, but I had lost everything that mattered. But this wasn't over. Not yet. I got into the car, pulled out my phone, and opened the file I had created over the past few days. Photos, messages, recordings, it was all there. And I had a plan for every piece of it. Rose and Rick had taken something from me. Now, I was going to take something from them. I started the car, the engine purring quietly beneath me, and as I drove into the fading afternoon light, one thought kept repeating in my head. They'll never see it coming. As I drove away from the house that had once been a sanctuary, a place where I found peace, I couldn't shake the icy calm that had settled over me. It wasn't like the adrenaline I felt on a mission. It was colder, darker, and far more dangerous. Rose and Rick had crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Now, it was time for them to understand just what they had set in motion. They thought they could play with my life, like I wouldn't notice, like I wouldn't do anything about it. They had no idea what they had awakened. I pulled into a quiet parking lot a few miles away and killed the engine. I needed to think, to plan my next move. Revenge wasn't just about acting in the heat of the moment. It was about control. About making sure every step they took from now on was under my control. First things first. I needed to make Rick's life fall apart, piece by piece, and I knew exactly where to start. I still had plenty of friends from the service, including a few who knew Rick just as well as I did. Some of them owed me favors, and the military is a small world. Information travels fast, especially when it's coming from the right sources. I opened my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Jared Hicks, I thought, tapping the name. Jared and I had served together in Afghanistan. He was one of the most connected guys I knew. If something went down on base, Jared would hear about it within minutes. He picked up on the second ring. "Mark," Jared's voice crackled through the speaker. "Been a while, brother. How's things?" "Hey, man. I need a favor," I said, skipping the small talk. "It's about Rick Stone." There was a pause. Jared knew Rick, had served with him on a few missions. I could almost hear the gears turning on the other end of the line. "What's up? Something wrong?" "You could say that." I took a deep breath, trying to keep the anger in check. "He's been sleeping with my wife." The silence on the other end was thick, tense. Jared finally spoke, his voice hard. "That son of a bitch. Say the word, and I'll make sure he never gets another post worth a damn." "That's the word," I replied, my tone cold and clear. "I want him cut off. No more promotions, no more cushy assignments. I want his name to be mud." Can you make it happen? Consider it done, Jared said without hesitation. I'll spread the word. He's finished. That was step one. Rick might have thought he could get away with betraying me, but the military wouldn't be so forgiving. His reputation, his career, it was all going to crumble, and there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. Next was Rose. I hadn't decided exactly how I wanted to play it with her yet. The divorce was inevitable, but I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. She had built her little perfect world on the lie of our marriage, and I was about to burn it all down. I scrolled through my contacts again, landing on Megan. Megan was one of Rose's closest friends, but she'd always been friendly with me too. I knew for a fact that Megan wasn't the biggest fan of Rick. She'd never said it outright, but there had been subtle jabs here and there about how Rick was too arrogant, how he thought he was better than everyone else. If I played my cards right, Megan would help me spread the story about what Rose had done, and Rose's carefully crafted reputation as the loyal wife would be destroyed. I sent Megan a text. Need to talk? It's about Rose. Call me when you can. I knew it wouldn't take long for Megan to respond. Gossip moved fast in their circle, and once the truth came out, Rose's friends would turn on her. Women like Rose thrived on appearances, on playing the role of the doting wife, the loving partner. But once the facade cracked, people like Megan would jump ship, and Rose would be left to drown in her own mess. A buzz on my phone snapped me back to the moment. It was an email notification from the DNA testing service I had used a few days earlier. I felt my stomach drop as I opened it. The results for my two boys, Caleb and Noah, were ready. For a second, I hesitated. I had been so focused on Rose and Rick's affair, on the betrayal between them, that I had almost forgotten why I had ordered the test in the first place. My mind raced with all the possibilities. What if they weren't mine? What if this betrayal went deeper than I thought? I clicked the link and opened the report. My eyes scanned the page, my heart pounding in my chest. And then, there it was, 99.9% probability of paternity for both boys. They were mine. A wave of relief crashed over me, so intense that I nearly dropped the phone. At least that hadn't been a lie. Whatever else Rose had done, whatever promises she had broken, the boys were still mine. That was the only good news I'd had in days, and I held on to it like a lifeline. But that relief was quickly followed by anger. Anger at how close I had come to losing everything, at how easily Rose had gambled with our lives. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had risked everything, including the family we had built together. And now, she was going to pay for it. I sat in the car for a long time, staring out at the empty lot, piecing together the final stages of my plan. The divorce would be ugly, but I was ready for that. I had the recordings, the photos, the evidence of her affair. The lawyers would have a field day with this, and I'd make sure she got nothing in the settlement. The house, the savings, the kids, it was all going to be mine. As for Rose, she'd be left with nothing but the mess she'd made and the wreckage of her reputation. I started the car and pulled out of the lot, the sun beginning to set on the horizon. The road ahead was long, but I could see it clearly now. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about taking back control of my life, about making sure that when the dust settled, I was the one left standing. Rick and Rose had no idea what was coming for them. They thought they had played me, but they had only set themselves up for a fall. And when they hit the ground, they'd realize one thing. You don't betray a soldier and walk away unscathed. Not when the soldier is me. As I drove through the fading light, the weight of everything started to settle in. The adrenaline was wearing off, and in its place was a strange kind of calm. Not the cold, calculated calm I'd been operating on for the past few days, but something deeper. It was the feeling of finality, of knowing that the storm was almost over. I wasn't the same man who had walked through the front door of my house just a few days ago. That man had believed in Rose, had believed in the life we'd built together. But now, that man was gone, burned away by the reality of betrayal, by the lies that had slowly unraveled everything. I pulled into a gas station on the outskirts of town, my mind still racing, but the pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place. The plan had been set in motion, and now it was just a matter of watching it unfold. As I filled up the tank, my phone buzzed. It was Megan. I knew this conversation would be the spark that ignited the final phase. I answered, my voice steady. "Mark? What's going on?" she asked, concern clear in her tone. "I need you to know something, Megan," I said, cutting straight to the point. "Rose has been having an affair with Rick." The silence on the other end was deafening. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, processing the information. Finally, she spoke, her voice tight with anger. That bastard. I knew something was off with him. And Rose, how could she do this to you?" "It's been going on for 6 months," I continued, behind my back. "But I've got the proof now. Messages, recordings, everything." Megan didn't hesitate. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I had no idea. She's been acting like everything's fine." "God, what a—" "It's fine," I interrupted, keeping my tone even. "I just need people to know. I don't want her playing the victim when this all comes out." "You don't have to worry about that," Megan said, her voice hard. "Once I tell the others, no one will take her side. She won't get any sympathy from anyone." That's what I had counted on. Rose's friends would turn on her the second they realized the truth, and she would be left alone, exposed for the liar she was. I thanked Megan and hung up, knowing that the social fallout for Rose would start almost immediately. By the time I got home, I could already feel the shift. I'd spent so much of my life being a protector of my country, my family, my friends, and yet, in the end, I couldn't protect myself from this. But that was the old me, the one who trusted blindly. This new version of me understood that trust had to be earned, and when it was broken, there were consequences. I parked the car and stepped out, the night air cool against my skin. The house loomed in front of me, dark and silent, a hollow reminder of what had once been a home. I walked inside, shutting the door behind me, and headed straight for the bedroom. Rose was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, her eyes red from crying. She looked up when I entered, but I didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. "I know you're filing for divorce," she said, her voice hoarse. "But I still love you, Mark. I know I've messed up, but maybe we can." "Stop," I said, cutting her off. "This isn't about love anymore. It's about respect. And you lost mine the moment you decided to betray me." Her lip quivered, but I didn't care. She had made her bed, literally, and now she had to lie in it, alone. I sat down on the chair by the window, staring out into the darkness. "I'm filing for full custody of the boys. You're going to agree to it." Her eyes widened, and she shook her head. "No, I'm their mother. You can't just—" "I can and I will," I said firmly. "I have everything I need to make sure you don't get a dime in the divorce. The affair, the lies, it's all documented. You won't win." Tears streamed down her face, but there was no sympathy left in me. "But what about them?" she choked out. "They need me. You can't just take them away." I looked at her, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the texts, the lies, the betrayal. "They deserve better than this," I said quietly. "Better than what you've done to this family." She didn't say anything after that. She just sat there, sobbing quietly into her hands, as the reality of her choices settled over her like a heavy blanket. I stood up, grabbing my keys from the nightstand. "I'm staying at a hotel tonight," I said. "I'll be back in the morning to start packing." As I walked out the door, I felt lighter. The weight of the betrayal was still there, but now it was something I could carry, something I could manage. I wasn't running anymore. I was in control. The road ahead would be long, and the divorce would be brutal, but I wasn't afraid of the fight. I had faced worse, survived worse. And this was just another battle, another mission. But this time, I wasn't fighting for my country, or my team, or even for Rose. This time, I was fighting for myself. And I knew, without a doubt, that I would win. The drive to the hotel was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses down on you. But I welcomed it. It gave me time to think, to absorb the reality of what my life had become and, more importantly, what it would be from here on out. The road stretched out in front of me, empty and dark, but it felt different now. For the first time in days, I wasn't consumed by anger or betrayal. Instead, I felt a strange sense of closure. When I pulled into the hotel parking lot, I sat there for a while, just breathing. It felt like I was finally waking up from a nightmare that had been building for months. I had taken the steps I needed to take. I had started the process of reclaiming my life, and soon enough, Rose and Rick would both feel the full weight of their actions. There was no undoing that. The hotel room was as impersonal as I expected, neutral walls, bland furniture, but that was fine. It wasn't about comfort right now. It was about having space to think, to process. I dropped my bag on the bed, sat down, and pulled out my phone. There were already a few messages waiting for me. One from Jared confirming that Rick's name was now blacklisted across several military circles, and one from Megan, short and to the point. Everyone knows. Rose is done. I put the phone down and leaned back, letting the satisfaction settle in. Rick was about to see his career crumble. There would be no promotions, no cushy assignments, no glowing recommendations. His military life, the life he had built on the back of our friendship, was over. And Rose? Well, Megan had done what I knew she would. Her reputation was in tatters. She might still have a few supporters left, but word travels fast, and it wouldn't be long before her betrayal reached everyone. It wouldn't be long before she found herself alone, shunned by the very people who had once admired her. The divorce would follow, and with the evidence I had, there was no way Rose would win. The boys would stay with me, and I'd make sure they were protected from all of this as much as possible. That was the most important thing now, keeping them safe, keeping them whole. As the night stretched on, I thought about what came next. The house would be sold, the marriage dissolved, and everything that had once been familiar would become distant memories. I'd move somewhere new, somewhere where the shadows of this betrayal couldn't reach me. I'd start fresh, with my boys by my side and the promise of a future that didn't include lies. I thought about Rick one last time, about how a man I had once called a brother had thrown it all away for something cheap, for something he would never keep. He and Rose had gambled with my trust, with my loyalty, and they had both lost. I knew I'd never hear from Rick again, and if I did, it wouldn't matter. He was part of the past now, part of the wreckage I was leaving behind. The next morning, I packed up my things and checked out of the hotel. As I drove back to the house, I felt a strange mix of emotions, sadness, anger, but mostly relief. I wasn't the same man who had stood in that driveway days ago, staring up at his home, wondering what was wrong. Now I knew the truth, and it had set me free. When I pulled into the driveway for the last time, the sun was rising, casting a soft light over the house. Rose's car was still there, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to speak to her. I was done with words. I just wanted to pack my things, take my boys, and leave her to deal with the mess she had made. As I packed up my belongings, I moved through the house like a ghost, silent, purposeful. Rose stayed upstairs, probably too ashamed to face me, and that was fine. There was nothing more to say. I packed up my boys' things next, folding their clothes, gathering their toys. This was the future I was protecting now, their future. As much as Rose had shattered our marriage, I wouldn't let her shatter them. By the time I was done, the house felt like a shell of what it used to be. It didn't hold the same memories, the same warmth. It was just a place now, a place I was ready to leave behind. I loaded the bags into the car, took one last look at the house, and got in. The boys were spending the weekend with their grandparents, so I'd pick them up later. For now, it was just me and the road ahead. As I drove away for the final time, I didn't look back. There was no reason to. I had survived wars, conflicts, and missions that had pushed me to my limits, but this had been the hardest battle of all, and I had won. The road stretched out in front of me, long and uncertain, but this time, I wasn't afraid. I was free. The war was over, and I had come out on top. And that's how it ended. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment your thoughts below.